The diner was unusually quiet that Tuesday morning, the kind of stillness that made every small sound feel magnified. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of Rosie's diner, catching the chrome edges of the counter and making the glass salt shakers sparkle like tiny diamonds. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the sweet scent of maple syrup creating that familiar comfort that had drawn people to this place for over 40 years. In the corner booth by the window sat Everett Garrison, 81 years old with hands that trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee cup, not from fear but from the weight of decades. His flannel shirt, faded blue and worn thin at the elbows, had seen better days. The same could be said for the heavy leather boots he wore, scuffed and cracked but polished with the kind of care that spoke of military discipline never fully abandoned. Everett arrived at Rosie's every morning at exactly 8:15. Had done so for the past 15 years, ever since his retirement from the lumber mill. Before that, he'd worked there for 35 years, the same mill where his father had worked and his grandfather before him. Cedar Falls, Montana wasn't a large town, but it was home. The kind of place where everyone knew your name, your business, and probably your grandfather's business too. This morning was no different from any other, at least not at first. Everett had woken in his small wooden house on Elm Street at 6:30, the same time he'd woken every day for as long as he could remember. The bedroom was quiet. Too quiet. It had been that way for 8 years now, ever since Irene passed. Her photograph still sat on the nightstand, exactly where it had always been. Their wedding photo from 1975. She'd worn a simple white dress, nothing fancy, and he'd worn his only suit. They were both smiling, young and full of hope, completely unaware of what the future held. The good and the bad. Mostly good if he was being honest. 43 years of marriage. One son. A life built together, piece by piece. Everett had reached over and touched the frame like he did every morning. A small ritual. A way of saying good morning to someone who could no longer answer back. The house felt enormous now, even though it was barely 1,200 square feet. Every room echoed with memories. The kitchen where Irene had taught Cole to bake cookies when he was 7. The living room where they'd watch Cole graduate high school on a grainy VHS tape, playing it back 3 times because Irene kept crying and wanted to see it again. The garage where Everett had taught Cole to change oil, to check tire pressure, to understand that a man took care of his things. That garage held something else now too. Something Everett tried not to think about too much, though he thought about it every single day. He'd made his coffee in the old percolator, the one Irene had bought at a garage sale in 1982. It still worked perfectly. He'd read the Cedar Falls Gazette, though there wasn't much news. The high school basketball team had won their regional championship. The town council was debating whether to repave Main Street. Mrs. Henderson's cat had been found after being missing for 3 days. Simple things, small town things. The kind of news that used to bore him when he was younger, but now brought him comfort. At least the world was still turning. At least life went on. His cell phone sat on the kitchen table. An old flip phone, not one of those fancy smartphones everyone seemed to have now. Cole had tried to get him to upgrade a few years back before everything fell apart. Said it would be easier to send pictures to video chat. Everett had refused. Didn't see the point. Who was he going to video chat with? The phone hadn't rung in 3 days. Before that, it had been a week. The only calls he got anymore were from telemarketers and the occasional wrong number. It hadn't always been that way. At 8 o'clock, Everett had put on his jacket, locked the front door, and walked the 6 blocks to Rosie's diner. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the mountains that surrounded Cedar Falls on 3 sides. His boots made a steady rhythm on the sidewalk. Left, right, left, right. The same rhythm that had carried him through rice paddies in Vietnam over 50 years ago. He didn't like to think about Vietnam. Tried not to most days. But it was always there, lurking in the back of his mind. The heat, the fear, the faces of men who never made it home. 17 of them in 1 month during the siege of Khe Sanh. He'd survived. They hadn't. He'd never fully understood why. The diner came into view at the end of Maple Street, its red and white striped awning faded but cheerful. Rosie's Diner had been a Cedar Falls institution since 1963. The original Rosie had passed away in 2001, but her daughter Louise had taken over, keeping everything exactly the way her mother had left it. Same red vinyl booths, same black and white checkered floor, same menu that hadn't changed in 40 years. Louise Harper was behind the counter when Everett walked in. 64 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and laugh lines around her eyes that spoke of a life well lived despite its hardships. She'd lost her husband Jack to a heart attack 9 years ago. She and Irene had been best friends since elementary school, which meant Louise had known Everett since he and Irene started dating in 1972. She looked up and smiled when the bell above the door chimed. "Morning, Ev, your usual morning, Lou, yes, ma'am." The exchange was the same every morning. Comfortable. Predictable. Everett made his way to his booth by the window, the same booth he'd sat in for 15 years. The vinyl was cracked in places, patched with duct tape. The table had a small burn mark from where someone had set down a hot plate carelessly sometime in the 90s. But it was his spot. Everyone in Cedar Falls knew it. He slid into the booth, his back to the wall facing the door. Old habit from the war. Never sit with your back to an entrance. Always know who's coming in. Always have an exit route planned. Habits like that never really left you. Louise brought over his coffee without being asked. Black, no sugar, no cream. The same way he'd been drinking it since boot camp in 1967. "How you doing today, Ev?" she asked, setting the cup down carefully. "Can't complain, Lou. You..." "Same old, same old. Quiet morning so far." She hesitated like she did sometimes, like she wanted to ask something but wasn't sure if she should. You hear from Cole lately?" There it was. The question that hung in the air between them every single morning, even when Louise didn't ask it out loud. Everett wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, feeling its warmth seep into his palms. "Saw his photo in the paper last month. Iron Brotherhood did some charity ride for the Children's Hospital over in Billings." Louise nodded slowly. "That's good. That's real good of them." What she didn't say, what she never said, was the thing they both knew. That Everett hadn't actually spoken to Cole in 12 years. That his only son lived less than 30 miles away and might as well have been on the moon. That every morning for 12 years, Everett had hoped the phone would ring, and every morning he'd been disappointed. "I'll get your breakfast started," Louise said softly and retreated to the kitchen. Everett turned to look out the window. Main Street was coming to life. Old Tom Bradley was opening up his hardware store across the street. The mailman was making his rounds. A young mother pushed a stroller past the diner, her toddler pointing excitedly at a dog tied up outside the grocery store. Normal life? Regular life. The kind of life that went on whether you were happy or sad, whether your family was whole or shattered into pieces. His mind drifted like it often did these days back to June of 2012. The worst month of his life, bar none. Worse than Vietnam. Worse than anything. Irene had been sick for 6 months. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors had said there wasn't much they could do by the time they found it. Stage 4. Maybe 6 months, they'd said. They'd been right almost to the day. Cole had come home from Billings, where he'd been living since 2005. Working construction, making decent money. He'd wanted to be there for his mother. Those last months had been hard. Watching Irene fade away, knowing there was nothing any of them could do to stop it. She died on June 14th, 2012. A Wednesday. It had been raining. The funeral was 2 days later. The whole town had turned out. Irene had taught second grade at Cedar Falls Elementary for 30 years. Everyone knew her. Everyone loved her. After the service, after everyone had gone home, it had just been Everett and Cole standing in the living room of the house on Elm Street, the house that suddenly felt like a museum of their life together. Irene's reading glasses on the side table, her cardigan draped over the back of her chair, her favorite coffee mug still in the dish rack. And Cole had said they should sell the house. Just like that. Standing there in his black suit, eyes red from crying, and he'd said the house was too much for Everett to maintain alone. Said it would be easier to move into something smaller, something more manageable. Said they could split the money, get Everett set up in a nice apartment near the senior center. Everett had felt something break inside his chest. This house. The house where he'd brought Irene as a bride. Where they'd brought Cole home from the hospital as a newborn. Where they'd celebrated every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone. And Cole wanted to sell it. Wanted to erase 40 years of memories because it would be easier. The argument had started quiet, but it didn't stay quiet. Everett had said things he regretted. Called Cole selfish. Said he didn't understand what the house meant. What Irene had meant. Cole had fired back, said Everett was living in the past. Said he was being stubborn and unreasonable. Said Mom would have wanted Everett to be practical, and that had been the final straw. Cole invoking Irene like he knew what she would have wanted better than Everett did. Everett had told Cole to leave. Told him if he wanted to sell things off and forget about his mother, he could do it somewhere else. Cole had left, walked out that door and hadn't come back. 12 years ago. Everett had picked up the phone 100 times in those 12 years. Maybe more. Had dialed all but the last digit. Had written letters he never sent. Had driven halfway to Billings before turning around and coming home. Pride was a terrible thing. It had cost him his son. But he didn't know how to get past it. Didn't know how to be the one to reach out first. What if Cole didn't want to hear from him? What if 12 years had turned whatever love his son had felt into indifference, or worse, into hate? So the silence had continued, day after day, month after month, year after year. Louise brought his breakfast, 2 eggs over easy bacon wheat toast, hash browns, the same breakfast he'd eaten every morning since Irene died. Before that, Irene had always made him oatmeal, said it was better for his heart. He'd eaten it without complaint for 43 years. But after she was gone, he couldn't stomach it anymore. The oatmeal tasted like grief. "Thanks, Lou," he said, pulling himself back to the present. "Anything else you need, you just holler," she said, and went back to the counter. Everett ate slowly, methodically. The diner started to fill up with the usual morning crowd. Retired folks mostly like himself. Jerry Atkinson, who'd worked at the post office for 40 years. Margaret Sullivan, who'd run the library until she retired. Betty Morrison, who still volunteered at the Historical Society 3 days a week. By 9 o'clock, the breakfast rush was in full swing. The diner was about half full, the sound of conversation and clinking silverware creating a pleasant background hum. Everett had finished his breakfast and was working on his second cup of coffee, reading a week-old copy of Field and Stream someone had left in the booth when the door chimed. He looked up out of habit. A young man walked in. Early 30s, broad shoulders, wearing a stained t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. Everett didn't recognize him, which was unusual in Cedar Falls. He had the look of someone who'd been up all night. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched tight. Brock Haywood, though Everett didn't know his name yet, walked up to the counter with the aggressive posture of a man looking for a fight. Louise approached with her usual friendly smile. "Morning, Hon. What can I get you?" "Coffee," Brock said. His voice was rough, hostile. "And make it quick." Louise's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her professionalism. She poured him a cup and set it down gently. "That'll be $3. $3? Brock's voice rose sharply. Several people in the diner turned to look. "You're charging $3 for coffee now. It was $2.50 last month." "Prices went up, hon," Louise said calmly. "Supplier increased their rates. I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do about it." "This is bullshit." Brock slammed his palm on the counter. The coffee cup rattled in its saucer. "You're gouging people. 50 cents more for the same damn coffee." Everett watched the scene unfold with growing concern. He recognized the signs, the aggression, the irrational anger over something small. This young man was drunk or high or both and looking for a reason to explode. Louise took a step back, her hand moving subtly toward the phone behind the counter. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down or leave." "Or what?" Brock leaned forward and his face inches from Louise's. "What are you going to do, old lady? Call the cops?" "Go ahead. I'll be gone before they get here." Everett felt his jaw tighten. He wanted to intervene, wanted to tell this punk to leave Louise alone. But he was 81 years old. His hands shook when he tried to hold a coffee cup steady. What could he do against a man 50 years younger and twice his size? The diner had gone silent. Everyone was watching now, but no one was moving. Typical. People liked to watch trouble, but they didn't like to get involved. Everett couldn't really blame them. He wasn't getting involved either. Brock grabbed the coffee cup and took a long drink, then threw a couple of crumpled dollar bills on the counter. "There, that's all it's worth." He turned away from the counter, his eyes scanning the diner like he was looking for something else to target. And then his gaze landed on Everett. For a moment, their eyes met. Everett saw something dark there, something angry and hurt and looking for an outlet. He looked away quickly, dropping his eyes back to his magazine. Don't engage. Don't make eye contact. Let him leave. But it was too late. Brock started walking toward Everett's booth. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate. The whole diner seemed to hold its breath. "You," Brock said, pointing at Everett. "You got a problem, old man." Everett kept his eyes on the magazine. "No, sir, no problem at all." "Then why are you staring at me?" "I wasn't staring, I'm just trying to enjoy my coffee in peace." Brock laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Peace, that's funny. You know what's not peaceful? Old people like you who ruin this country. Who sent guys like my dad to die in wars that didn't mean anything? Who took all the good jobs and all the money and left nothing for the rest of us? Everett's hands tightened on his coffee cup. He could feel his heart rate picking up. This was escalating, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "I don't want any trouble," Everett said quietly. "Why don't you just go on your way? Why don't you shut your mouth?" Brock was standing right next to the booth now. Everett could smell the alcohol on his breath. Whiskey, probably. Old and cheap. Louise's voice came from behind the counter, shaking slightly. "Sir, please, leave him alone. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Brock said, not taking his eyes off Everett. "Like I said, I'll be gone before they get here. But first, I think this old man needs to learn some respect." Everything happened very fast after that. Brock reached down and grabbed Everett by the front of his flannel shirt, hauling him half out of the booth. Everett tried to pull away, but his 81-year-old body couldn't match the strength of a man in his prime, even a drunk one. And then Brock's hand came across Everett's face in a vicious slap that snapped his head to the side. The sound cracked through the diner like a gunshot. The impact sent Everett's reading glasses flying off his face. He tasted blood, immediately felt it on his tongue, copper and warm. Brock let go, and Everett slumped back into the booth, his hand coming up instinctively to his face. His left cheek was already going numb, the way it does when trauma is severe enough that the body shuts down the pain receptors. He knew it would hurt later. Right now, it just felt strange, disconnected. Someone in the diner screamed. Might have been Margaret Sullivan. Might have been someone else. Everett's ears were ringing. He opened his eyes, not even realizing he'd closed them. Brock was standing over him, breathing hard, looking almost surprised at what he'd just done. Like he'd been possessed by something and was only now coming back to himself. Everett's hand was shaking as he held it against his face. He could feel his wedding ring, the silver band Irene had placed on his finger 49 years ago, cold against his burning skin. And then something else. The ring was loose. Too loose. It slipped off his finger and fell, hitting the edge of the table before bouncing away. Everett watched it roll across the black and white checkered floor in what felt like slow motion, spinning and wobbling, before finally coming to rest under the booth next to his. His wedding ring, the symbol of 43 years of marriage, the last physical connection to Irene, just lying there on the dirty diner floor. The pain that hit him then had nothing to do with his face. He'd survived Vietnam. He'd watched 17 men die in the span of 30 days. He'd held his best friend's hand while he bled out from a wound that turned his stomach into a crater. He'd come home to a country that hated him for serving. He'd buried his wife after watching cancer eat her alive from the inside out. He'd lost his son to pride and stubbornness. And now a drunk stranger had hit him in a diner, and his wedding ring was on the floor, and he was 81 years old and powerless to do anything about any of it. Everett became aware of Louise calling his name. Ev, are you okay? Someone call 911. No, he managed to say. His voice sounded strange, distant. No ambulance. Ev, you're bleeding. We need to get you checked out. I'm fine. He wasn't fine. Nothing was fine, but what would an ambulance do? What would a hospital do? Put a bandage on his face. They couldn't bandage the real wound. Brock was backing away, his face a mix of anger and fear, and something that might have been shame. He was giving me a hard time. I was just... No one was listening to him. Jerry Atkinson had stood up from his booth, his cell phone in his hand. I got your license plate, buddy. Cops are on their way. That seemed to snap Brock out of whatever trance he was in. He turned and ran, slamming through the diner door so hard the bell nearly tore off its mounting. They heard his car engine roar to life outside, tires squealing as he peeled out of the parking lot. And then there was just silence. Louise came around the counter with a clean dish towel and a bag of ice. She slid into the booth across from Everett, her hands gentle as she reached for his face. Let me see. Everett lowered his hand. Louise winced when she saw the damage. His left cheek was already swelling, turning an angry purple red. The corner of his mouth was split, still bleeding sluggishly. She pressed the ice pack wrapped in the towel against his face. Everett flinched, but didn't pull away. Why? He asked. It was all he could think to say. Why would he do that? Louise's eyes were shining with tears. I don't know, honey. Some people are just full of poison. They need to spread it around because they can't hold it all inside. Everett nodded slightly. It made his face hurt worse. He didn't care. Jerry had gotten down on his hands and knees and was fishing under the booth next to Everett's. Got it, he said after a moment holding up the silver wedding band. He wiped it on his shirt and handed it to Everett. Here you go, Ev. Everett took the ring with trembling fingers. It felt heavier than it should. He tried to put it back on, but his hands were shaking too badly. After 3 attempts, he just closed his fist around it and held it tight. The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 officers Everett had known for years. They took statements, wrote everything down in their little notebooks, told him they'd find Brock Haywood and press charges, asked if he wanted to go to the hospital. He said no. What he wanted was to go home, to go back to his quiet house on Elm Street where the world couldn't touch him, where he could sit in the silence and pretend everything was fine. But he didn't move. He just sat there in his booth holding his wedding ring, the ice pack pressed to his face, while Louise sat across from him and the morning sun continued to pour through the windows like nothing had happened. The other customers gradually went back to their breakfast. Conversations resumed quieter now, more subdued. Life went on. It always did. Everett thought about Cole, wondered what his son would think if he could see his father now. 81 years old, beaten by a stranger in a diner, too weak to defend himself. Would Cole feel sorry for him? Would he care at all? Probably not. 12 years was a long time. Long enough to forget. Long enough to stop caring. Louise reached across the table and put her hand over Everett's free hand. You want me to call someone for you, Ev? Anyone you want me to reach out to? He almost laughed. Who would she call? He had no family, no close friends, just acquaintances and fellow old-timers who would express their sympathy and then forget about it by tomorrow. No, he said. Thank you, Lou, but no, I'll be all right. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. You just sit here as long as you need to. I'll keep the coffee coming. So Everett sat. The ice pack had gone warm against his face, the melted water dripping onto his shirt. His cheek throbbed with a deep aching pain that he knew would get worse before it got better. His mouth tasted like blood and coffee. He looked down at the wedding ring in his palm. 49 years ago, Irene had placed this ring on his finger and promised to love him forever. She'd kept that promise right up until her last breath. And here he was still wearing it 8 years after she was gone, like if he just kept it on long enough, she might come back. But she wasn't coming back. Cole wasn't coming back. No one was coming back. This was his life now. Sitting alone in a diner getting assaulted by strangers with nothing to show for 81 years of living except scars and regrets and a silver ring that was too loose for his thinning fingers. The bell above the door chimed again. Everett looked up reflexively, some part of him still on alert, still watching for threats. But it was just Betty Morrison coming in for her usual late breakfast. She saw Everett and the ice pack, and her face crumpled with concern, but Louise intercepted her before she could come over and make a fuss. Everett turned back to the window. Outside, life in Cedar Falls continued its slow, steady pace. The mailman had moved down the street. Tom Bradley was helping a customer load bags of mulch into a pickup truck. The young mother with the stroller was gone, replaced by 2 teenagers on skateboards. Normal life. The kind that happened to other people. People whose sons still talked to them. People who didn't spend every morning sitting alone in a diner counting the years since they'd heard their child's voice. He thought about the garage at home, about what waited for him there covered with a tarp in the corner. He'd go home after this, after the police were done, after the pain in his face became manageable. He'd go home and he'd go into that garage like he did every Saturday morning. And he'd talk to Cole like he always did, even though Cole wasn't there to hear, even though Cole probably didn't care. Even though 12 years of silence had taught him that some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. But he'd do it anyway, because hope was a stubborn thing, and because an 81-year-old man sitting alone in a diner with a split lip and a bruised face didn't have much else left to hold on to. 20 minutes had passed since Brock Haywood's tires had screeched out of the Rosie's Diner parking lot. 20 minutes of Louise fussing over Everett with fresh ice packs and paper towels of other customers, whispering and stealing glances of the police officers, finishing their reports and promising they'd track down the perpetrator. Everett just wanted them all to stop looking at him, stop treating him like he was made of glass, stop acting like what happened was some kind of tragedy instead of just another Tuesday morning gone wrong. The ice had helped with the swelling, but his face still throbbed with each heartbeat. His left eye was starting to puff up the lid heavy and tight. He'd be sporting a spectacular black eye by tomorrow. The split in his lip had finally stopped bleeding, but he could feel it reopening every time he moved his mouth. After several attempts and with Louise's help using dish soap, he'd finally managed to work the wedding ring back onto his finger. It sat there now, a familiar weight, slightly looser than it used to be. Everything got looser with age. Skin joints connections to the people you loved. But at least it was back where it belonged. Back where Irene had placed it 49 years ago. Jerry Atkinson had gone back to his breakfast, though he kept glancing over every few minutes like he expected Everett to suddenly collapse. Margaret Sullivan had left, but not before pressing Everett's hand and telling him she'd pray for him at church on Sunday. Betty Morrison sat at the counter talking in low tones with Louise, both women occasionally looking his way with matching expressions of concern. Everett stared out the window, not really seeing Main Street anymore. His mind had drifted back to that garage, to the ritual he'd maintained every Saturday morning for 12 years, the one thing that kept him tethered to the idea that maybe someday things could be different. The bell above the door chimed. Everett didn't look up at first. He'd learned his lesson about making eye contact with strangers who walked into the diner. But then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the quiet Tuesday morning atmosphere of a small Montana town. The deep rumble of motorcycle engines, multiple engines, growing louder as they approached, then cutting off one by one in the parking lot outside. Now Everett did look up. Through the window he could see them pulling in. Big bikes, Harley-Davidsons, mostly chrome, catching the morning sun, black paint gleaming. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. They lined up in a neat row, their riders dismounting in synchronized motion that spoke of practice and discipline. The men wore leather vests over their shirts, the kind with patches and insignias that marked them as a motorcycle club, not a gang. There was a difference, though. Most people didn't know it. Gangs were about crime and violence. Clubs were about brotherhood and freedom and the open road. Though Everett supposed the line between the two could get blurry sometimes. The diner had gone completely silent. Even Louise had stopped mid-sentence, her dish towel frozen halfway to the coffee maker. 7 men walked toward the diner entrance. They moved with the kind of confidence that came from being used to people watching them, used to being the most dangerous thing in any room they entered. Their boots were heavy on the pavement, their leather creaked as they moved. The man in front was taller than the others, broader in the shoulders. His beard was thick and dark, shot through with silver that caught the light. He had a scar on his forehead running from his left eyebrow up into his hairline. His arms were covered in tattoos, intricate designs that disappeared under the sleeves of his vest. The vest itself bore a patch on the back. Everett could see it as the men approached. Iron Brotherhood, MC Billings, Montana. Iron Brotherhood. Everett knew that name. Everyone in Montana knew that name. They were one of the largest motorcycle clubs in the state, with chapters in Billings, Missoula, and Great Falls. They did charity rides for veterans' hospitals. They escorted funeral processions for fallen soldiers. They ran toy drives at Christmas and raised money for children's cancer research. They were also not people you wanted to mess with if you valued your health and well-being. The leader pulled open the door to Rosie's diner. The bell chimed, cheerful and oblivious to the sudden tension that had filled the room like smoke. All 7 men entered. They filled the small diner with their presence, making the space feel suddenly cramped. Their eyes swept the room, taking in every detail, assessing every person, looking for threats, looking for trouble. And then the leader's eyes landed on Everett. For a moment, neither of them moved. Everett felt his breath catch in his chest. There was something in those eyes, something that made his heart skip a beat, a flash of recognition, a flash of something deeper than recognition. Pain. The leader's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His eyes moved from Everett's face to the ice pack sitting on the table, to the spots of blood on Everett's flannel shirt, to the defensive way Everett was holding himself hunched over like he was trying to make himself smaller. One of the other bikers, a shorter man with a shaved head and a goatee, stepped forward. "Boss!" But the leader held up a hand, silencing him. His eyes never left Everett. And then he started walking toward the corner booth. Louise found her voice. "Gentlemen, welcome to Rosie's. If you're looking for breakfast, we've got plenty of room at the counter." The leader didn't acknowledge her. He kept walking, his boots heavy on the checkered floor. The other 6 men fanned out behind him, not threatening exactly, but present. Very present. Everett's hands tightened on his coffee cup. His pulse was racing now. What did these men want? Had they known Brock Haywood? Were they friends of his, come to finish what he'd started? No. That didn't make sense. The way the leader was looking at him wasn't hostile. It was something else. something Everett couldn't quite name. The man reached the booth and stopped. Up close, Everett could see more details. The scar on his forehead wasn't the only one. There were other smaller ones on his hands and arms. The tattoos were military insignia mixed with Celtic designs and names written in elaborate script. His eyes were blue-gray like storm clouds, and there was something familiar about them. "Sir," the man said. His voice was deep rough from years of shouting over motorcycle engines and wind. "Are you all right?" Everett blinked. Of all the things he'd expected this man to say, that wasn't one of them. "I'm fine. Just a misunderstanding." "That doesn't look like a misunderstanding." The man gestured to Everett's face. "That looks like assault. It's handled. The police were already here. They're looking for the guy who did it." The man nodded slowly. Then, without asking permission, he slid into the booth across from Everett. The movement was smooth practiced. He settled into the seat like he belonged there, his eyes never leaving Everett's face. The other 6 bikers took up positions around the diner, not blocking exits, not being overtly threatening, but present enough that everyone in the room was acutely aware of them. Jerry Atkinson looked like he was considering leaving his eggs and making a run for it. Betty Morrison had gone pale. Only Louise seemed unafraid. She approached the booth with her coffee pot held like a weapon. "Can I get you gentlemen anything?" "Coffee," the leader said. "For all of us. And whatever this man's having. On my tab." "I already ate," Everett said quietly. "Then have dessert. Pie. They make good pie here, don't they?" The man looked up at Louise. "What kind of pie you got today, ma'am?" Louise seemed taken aback by being called ma'am by a biker who looked like he could bend steel with his bare hands. "Apple, cherry, and pecan." "Bring us 2 slices of apple, and ice cream if you got it." "I really don't need any pie," Everett protested. "I know you don't need it, but I'm buying it anyway." The man turned his attention back to Everett, and his expression softened in a way that seemed almost painful. "Please, just let me buy you some pie." There was something in his voice, something that made Everett's throat tighten. He nodded slowly. Louise retreated to get the coffee and pie, casting uncertain glances back at the booth as she went. The man across from Everett was staring at him with an intensity that was starting to make him uncomfortable, not in a threatening way, more like he was trying to memorize every detail of Everett's face, like he was seeing a ghost and couldn't quite believe it was real. "Do I know you?" Everett asked finally. The man's jaw worked like he was trying to get words out, and they were stuck somewhere in his chest. "Yeah, you know me." "I don't think I do. I'm sorry my memory isn't what it used to be, but I'm pretty sure I'd remember meeting someone from a motorcycle club." "You didn't meet me from the club." The man's hands were on the table now, flat against the surface. His fingers were thick, scarred from old injuries, and on his right wrist, just barely visible under the sleeve of his leather jacket, was a watch. A silver Seiko watch with a cracked crystal and a leather band worn soft from years of use. Everett's breath stopped in his chest. He knew that watch. He'd bought it at a pawn shop in Billings in 1998. Paid $60 for it, which had been a stretch on his salary at the time. He'd given it to someone for a birthday present, someone who'd been so excited to get his first real watch that he'd worn it every day, even to bed. His eyes snapped back to the man's face. Really looked at him now, past the beard and the scars and the weathered skin, past the leather and the tattoos and the hard edges that came from a life spent on the road. And he saw it. The shape of the jaw, the set of the eyes, the way the man's left eyebrow had a small break in it from where he'd fallen off his bike at age 9 and needed 3 stitches. "Cole." The word came out as barely a whisper. Everett wasn't even sure he'd said it out loud until the man's eyes closed briefly, like hearing his name had caused him physical pain. "Yeah, Dad. It's me. Dad." 12 years. 12 years since Everett had heard that word directed at him. 12 years since his son had called him anything at all. His hands started shaking. He pulled them off the table, trying to hide it, but it was too late. Cole had already seen. "I don't understand," Everett managed. "How are you here? Did Louise call you?" "She called me 6 months ago." The words hit Everett like a physical blow. 6 months. Cole nodded. "November. She said she was worried about you. Said you were getting more withdrawn, eating less. She thought maybe if I came around it might help. But you didn't come." "I did come." Cole's voice was rough. "I came back to Cedar Falls every Saturday morning for the last 6 months. I'd park a couple blocks away and I'd watch you walk to the diner, watch you go inside, sit in that same booth, drink your coffee and eat your breakfast alone. Everett felt like the ground had dropped out from under him. You were watching me for 6 months. I couldn't make myself come in. Every week I'd tell myself this was the week. This was the day I'd walk through that door and talk to you. And every week I'd sit there in my truck and watch you through the window, and I couldn't do it. Why not? Cole's hands clenched into fists on the table. Because I didn't know what to say. Because 12 years is a long time and I didn't know if you'd want to see me. Because I was a coward. You're not a coward. Yes, I am. I ran away when Mom died instead of staying and helping you through it. I said terrible things to you. And then I was too proud to apologize. Too scared you'd reject me. So I stayed away, and the longer I stayed away, the harder it got to come back. Louise appeared with the coffee and pie, setting them down with trembling hands before retreating quickly. Neither Everett nor Cole acknowledged her. They were locked in their own world, 12 years of silence sitting between them like a wall made of grief and pride and regret. Lou called me this morning, Cole continued. His voice was shaking now, the hard biker exterior cracking to reveal something raw and broken underneath. Said some drunk asshole hit you. Said you were bleeding and wouldn't go to the hospital. Said I needed to get here now if I wanted to see my father. So you came. I grabbed my brothers and we rode straight here. 45 minutes from Billings, we did it in 30. Cole's eyes were wet now, though no tears had fallen yet. I saw your face when I walked in, and I wanted to kill him. Whoever did this to you, I wanted to find him and make him hurt the way you're hurting. It's not that bad, just a bruise. It's not about the bruise. Cole's voice rose, drawing looks from the other customers and his fellow bikers. He took a breath, clearly trying to control himself. You're 81 years old, Dad. Someone hit you. Someone hurt you. And I wasn't there to stop it because I've been sitting in my truck 2 blocks away for 6 months like a coward instead of walking through that door and talking to you. Everett didn't know what to say. His mind was reeling. Cole had been here every Saturday for 6 months, watching him, wanting to talk to him. And Everett had had no idea. How many times had he walked right past Cole's truck without knowing it? How many mornings had he sat in this booth wishing his son would call, while Cole sat 2 blocks away wishing he had the courage to come inside? I'm sorry, Cole said. The words came out choked. I'm so sorry, Dad, for everything, for what I said after Mom's funeral, for staying away, for not being there when you needed me, for being too stubborn and stupid to pick up the phone, for wasting 12 years because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. Everett opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat was too tight. His eyes were burning. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear them, but it didn't help. Cole reached across the table and gently took Everett's left hand. He looked down at the silver wedding band sitting slightly loose on his father's finger, the ring that had been there for 49 years through everything. His thumb traced over the worn metal, and his voice broke. You never took it off, even after Mom died, even after I left. You kept it on. Of course I did, Everett said quietly. It's a promise, and I don't break my promises. Cole's grip tightened around his father's hand. That's where it belongs, he whispered, right where it's always been. And that was what broke Everett. Not the assault, not the pain, not 12 years of loneliness and silence, but this simple moment. His son, this man he hadn't spoken to in over a decade, holding his hand and acknowledging the promise Everett had kept all these years with such tenderness that it made Everett's chest feel like it was caving in. A sound escaped him, half sob, half gasp. He tried to pull his hand back, tried to hide his face, but Cole held on. His grip tightened, not painful but firm. Anchoring. It's okay, Cole said. It's okay, Dad. I'm here. I'm right here. The tears came then. Everett couldn't stop them. Didn't even try. They ran down his bruised face, stinging the cut on his lip, and he didn't care. His shoulders shook with sobs he'd been holding back for 8 years since the day Irene died, and his world had collapsed. Cole stood up from his side of the booth and slid in next to Everett instead. His arm went around his father's shoulders, pulling him close the way Everett used to pull Cole close when he was a little boy and had a nightmare. The roles reversed, the child comforting the parent, and it should have been humiliating, but it wasn't. It was the best thing Everett had felt in 12 years. I missed you, Everett choked out between sobs. I missed you so much. I missed you too, every single day. Cole's voice was thick with his own tears. I'm sorry I stayed away. I'm sorry I let pride keep me from you. I'm so sorry. They sat like that for a long time. The diner around them had gone completely silent. Even the bikers standing guard seemed moved by the scene, several of them looking away or finding sudden interest in the menu board on the wall. Finally, Everett managed to get himself under control. He pulled back, wiping at his face with his napkin, wincing when he touched the bruise. Cole handed him a fresh napkin from the dispenser. Sorry, Everett muttered. Making a scene. You got nothing to apologize for. Cole's hand was still on Everett's shoulder, like he was afraid if he let go, Everett would disappear. They sat in silence for a moment. Not the terrible silence of 12 years apart, but a different kind. The silence of two people who had so much to say they didn't know where to start. The door to the diner opened again. Both Everett and Cole looked up. Everett's body tensed automatically, some part of him still on alert for threats after what had happened with Brock Haywood. But it wasn't Brock, it was one of the town's two police officers, Deputy Chris Morrison, coming back with an update. He stopped short when he saw the bikers, his hand moving instinctively to his belt before he recognized the Iron Brotherhood patches. Everything okay in here, Lou? He called to Louise. Fine, Chris. These gentlemen are just having some coffee and pie. Chris didn't look convinced, but he nodded and approached Everett's booth. His eyes widened when he saw Cole sitting there with his arm around Everett. Mr. Garrison, I wanted to let you know we found Brock Haywood. He was pulled over about 20 miles outside of town for erratic driving. When the trooper ran his plates and saw the bolo we'd put out, they arrested him. He'll be charged with assault. Thank you, Deputy. Chris nodded, but his attention had shifted to Cole. I'm sorry, sir, but I need to ask. What's your business here? Before Cole could answer, Everett spoke up. This is my son, Colton Garrison. He came to check on me after what happened. The surprise on Chris Morrison's face was almost comical. Everyone in Cedar Falls knew Everett's son had left town 12 years ago and never looked back. And now here he was sitting in Rosie's diner with his arm around his father like he'd never left. Oh, well, that's good. Chris seemed at a loss. I'm glad you have someone here with you, Mr. Garrison. If you need anything else, you just let us know. Will do. Thank you, Deputy. Chris left, casting one more uncertain glance at the bikers before heading back out to his patrol car. Louise brought fresh coffee without being asked, refilling both their cups. She smiled at them, her eyes red like she'd been crying in the kitchen. You boys need anything else, you just holler. Thanks, Lou, Cole said. Then to Everett, you should eat your pie before the ice cream melts. Everett looked down at the slice of apple pie with vanilla ice cream that he'd forgotten about. It looked good, but he didn't think he could eat. His stomach was in knots. Too many emotions too fast. Not hungry. Not really. Too much happening. Cole nodded. He picked up his fork and cut off a piece of his own pie, but he didn't eat it. Just pushed it around the plate. I saw the article about you in the paper last month, Everett said quietly. The charity ride for the Children's Hospital. Yeah, we do one every year. Raise money for kids with cancer. It's important to give back. That's good. Your mother would have been proud. Cole's fork stopped moving. You think so? I know so. She always wanted you to be happy, to find your purpose. Looks like you did. I found a family. Cole gestured to the 6 men positioned around the diner. These guys, they're my brothers. We look out for each other. We ride together. We bleed together. It's not the family I was born with, but it's the family I chose. The words stung even though Everett knew they weren't meant to. I'm glad you had people. Glad you weren't alone. I was alone, though, in the ways that mattered. Cole finally met his eyes again. I had brothers, yeah, but I didn't have my father. And there were so many times over the years when something would happen and I'd want to call you, want to tell you about it. But I'd remember that last fight and I'd convince myself you wouldn't want to hear from me. I always wanted to hear from you. I picked up the phone 1,000 times to call you. Why didn't you? Same reason you didn't. Pride, fear. The longer it went on, the harder it got to break the silence. Everett looked down at his wedding ring, twisting it on his finger. After your mother died, I felt like I'd lost everything. And when you left too, it just confirmed what I already believed, that I wasn't worth sticking around for. Dad, no, that's not true. Felt true. Feels true most days, if I'm being honest. Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something about why Lou called me 6 months ago. Everett looked up. There was something in Cole's expression that made his stomach clench with worry. She said you'd been losing weight, eating less, withdrawing more. She said she was worried about you. Cole's hands were shaking now. She said she thought you were giving up, and she didn't want to watch you waste away alone. The words hung in the air between them. Everett wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. Because Lou had been right. He had been giving up. Had been going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Waiting for the end because there didn't seem to be much point in the middle. So I came back, Cole continued. Every Saturday for 6 months. I'd watch you walk to the diner and I'd tell myself that as long as you kept walking, as long as you kept showing up, I had time. Time to work up the courage. Time to figure out what to say. Time to make things right. But you never came in. No, because I'm a coward and an idiot. Cole's voice cracked. And then Lou called this morning and said someone had hurt you, and I realized I'd wasted 6 months sitting in my truck when I should have been in here, sitting across from you, talking to you, being your son. Everett reached across and put his hand over Cole's. It was the first time he'd initiated physical contact, and he felt Cole's fingers curl around his in response. You're here now, Everett said. That's what matters. Is it enough? Can you forgive me? The question was so earnest, so vulnerable, that it made Everett's heart ache. This hard biker with his leather and tattoos and scars asking his 81-year-old father for forgiveness, like a little boy who'd broken a window with a baseball. Cole, I forgave you years ago. I just didn't know how to tell you. Cole's eyes closed. A tear escaped and ran down into his beard. I don't deserve you. You're my son. Deserving doesn't enter into it. They sat there, hands clasped on top of the table, while the morning sun shifted and the diner slowly came back to life around them. The other customers had started eating again, though they still cast curious glances at the booth in the corner. The bikers had relaxed their vigilant positions, a few of them even sitting down at the counter to actually order breakfast. One of them, the shorter man with the shaved head who'd spoken earlier, approached the booth. He had kind eyes, Everett noticed. Despite the tough exterior, there was genuine warmth there. Boss, hate to interrupt, but we should probably let folks know where we are. Club's gonna wonder what happened to us. Cole nodded without letting go of Everett's hand. Yeah, Jake, this is my father, Everett Garrison. Dad, this is Jake Rodriguez, my vice president and best friend. Jake extended his hand and Everett shook it. The man's grip was firm but careful, like he was aware of how much damage he could do if he wasn't cautious. It's an honor to meet you, sir. Cole talks about you all the time. Everett looked at his son in surprise. He does, all the time, Jake confirmed. Tells stories about when he was a kid, about fishing trips and learning to work on cars and all kinds of stuff. We all feel like we know you already. The revelation left Everett speechless. Cole had been talking about him, thinking about him, remembering him. All these years when Everett had assumed his son had moved on and forgotten, Cole had been carrying the same memories, the same longing. You can head back to Billings, Cole told Jake. I'm staying here with my dad. You sure, boss? Yeah, I'll catch up with you guys later. Take the truck back. I'll figure out a ride. Jake nodded and went to gather the other bikers. They filed out of the diner one by one, several of them nodding respectfully to Everett as they passed. The sound of their motorcycles starting up filled the air, then faded as they pulled out of the parking lot and headed back toward Billings. And then it was just Everett and Cole and Louise and the handful of regular customers who'd witnessed the whole thing. You don't have to stay, Everett said, even though the thought of Cole leaving made his chest tight with panic. I know you have responsibilities, the club and everything. Nothing is more important than this, than you. Cole's voice was firm. I wasted 12 years. I'm not wasting another second. They finished their pie in comfortable silence. It was strange, Everett thought, how quickly they'd fallen back into something that felt like a rhythm, like the 12 years had compressed into something smaller. Not gone, not forgotten, but not the insurmountable wall they'd seemed an hour ago. When they finally left the diner, Louise hugged them both. You come back together next time you hear me. I want to see both of you in that booth. Yes, ma'am, Cole promised. They walked out into the morning sun. Cole's motorcycle was still parked in the lot, a massive black Harley with chrome accents and the Iron Brotherhood logo painted on the tank. "I can give you a ride home," Cole offered. "If you want." Everett looked at the bike. He'd never been on a motorcycle in his life. At 81, it seemed like an odd time to start. But then again, at 81, what did he have to lose? "Okay." Cole grinned, the first real smile Everett had seen on his face. It transformed him, made him look younger. Made him look like the boy Everett remembered. He helped Everett onto the back of the bike, showing him where to put his feet, making sure he was secure. Then he swung his leg over and settled into the seat in front. "Hold on tight, Dad." Everett wrapped his arms around his son's waist. He could feel the solid warmth of him, real and present, and here after so many years of absence. The engine roared to life beneath them. And as they pulled out of the parking lot heading toward Elm Street and the house where Cole had grown up, Everett felt something he hadn't felt in 12 years. Hope. The ride to Elm Street took less than 5 minutes, but to Everett it felt both impossibly long and far too short. The vibration of the motorcycle beneath him, the wind against his bruised face, the solid presence of his son in front of him, it was overwhelming in the best possible way. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed physical closeness with another human being until now. 8 years of living alone, 12 years without his son. All of it compressed into this moment of holding on tight as they navigated the familiar streets of Cedar Falls. Cole pulled into the driveway of the small wooden house and cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. Neither of them moved for a moment, and Everett was reluctant to let go, afraid that if he did, Cole might disappear like smoke. But Cole stayed solid and real as Everett finally released his grip and climbed off the bike. His legs were shaky, whether from the ride or the emotion, or simply being 81 years old, he couldn't say. Cole removed his helmet and hung it on the handlebars, then looked at the house. Really looked at it. His expression was complicated layers of memory and pain and longing all tangled together. "It looks exactly the same," he said quietly. "Haven't changed much. Didn't see the point. The shutters need painting. I know, been meaning to get to it. The gutter on the left side is sagging. I know that too." Cole turned to face him. "Why didn't you call me if you needed help with the house? I would have come. Would you have before today?" The question hung between them. Cole's jaw worked, but he didn't answer. They both knew the truth. Before this morning, before Brock Haywood's fist had connected with Everett's face, before Louise's desperate phone call, Cole would not have come. He would have continued his Saturday morning vigils from 2 blocks away, watching, but never approaching, wanting, but never reaching out. "Come on," Everett said, breaking the tension. "I'll make us some coffee." He unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like it always did, a mixture of old wood coffee and the faint ghost of Irene's lavender perfume that he swore he could still detect sometimes, even though it had been 8 years. Probably his imagination, or wishful thinking. Cole followed him inside, and Everett heard his sharp intake of breath. Everything was exactly as Cole remembered it. The same furniture in the same places, the same photographs on the same walls, the same blue ceramic bowl on the entry table where Irene used to keep her keys. Time had frozen in this house the day she died, and Everett had done nothing to restart it. "Dad," Cole's voice was thick, "you kept everything." "Of course I kept everything. This is our home. Your home." Cole walked slowly through the living room, touching things with a kind of reverent care. The back of the couch where he used to vault over instead of walking around. The bookshelf where Irene had displayed her collection of ceramic birds. The mantel above the fireplace where their family photos stood in a row. He stopped in front of those photos, picked up one that showed all three of them, Everett, Irene, and 10-year-old Cole, at Yellowstone National Park. They were standing in front of Old Faithful, all wearing matching ridiculous tourist hats that Irene had insisted on buying. Cole was missing his 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera like he'd won the lottery. "I remember this day," Cole said. "I threw up in the car on the way home because I ate too much fudge." "You ate an entire pound of fudge. Your mother told you to stop, but you wouldn't listen." "I was sick for 2 days." "Served you right." Everett moved into the kitchen, filling the percolator with water and coffee grounds. His hands were steadier now than they'd been at the diner. Having Cole here in the house made everything feel more solid somehow. More real. Cole continued his tour of the living room while the coffee brewed. He found more photos, more memories frozen in frames, birthday parties and Christmas mornings, and fishing trips and graduations. A whole life documented in snapshots and smiles. "You kept my room, didn't you?" Cole asked. Go see for yourself. Cole disappeared down the hallway. Everett heard the door open, heard the creak of the floorboard that had always creaked no matter how many times he tried to fix it. Heard silence. He poured 2 cups of coffee and carried them down the hall. Cole was standing in the middle of the bedroom, turning in a slow circle. The room was exactly as he'd left it 12 years ago. The bed was made with the same blue plaid comforter. The poster of a Harley-Davidson motorcycle still hung on the wall. The bookshelf still held a collection of car magazines and paperback westerns. Even the closet door was half open the way Cole had always left it, driving Irene crazy because she insisted doors should be either fully open or fully closed. You didn't pack anything away, Cole said. Didn't turn it into an office or a guest room or anything. It's your room. Why would I do that? Cole sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. The mattress squeaked. Most parents would have, after 12 years of their kid being gone. I'm not most parents, and you're not gone. You're just not here. Everett handed him one of the coffee cups and sat down beside him. There's a difference. They drank their coffee in silence. Outside, a car drove past. A dog barked. Life in Cedar Falls continued its slow, steady rhythm, oblivious to the small miracle happening inside the house on Elm Street. I need to tell you something, Everett said finally, about what I've been doing. Every Saturday morning. Cole looked at him curious and a little wary. Come on, I'll show you. Everett led him back through the house and out the side door to the garage. It was a detached structure, old and weathered, with a wooden door that stuck in humid weather. He pulled it open and reached for the light switch. The fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, illuminating the space. It was neat and organized, tools hanging on pegboards, old paint cans stacked on shelves, a workbench along one wall. And in the corner, covered with a canvas tarp, was a large shape. Cole had gone very still. He knew that shape. Knew it the way you know your own shadow. Everett walked over to the tarp and pulled it off in one smooth motion. Underneath was a motorcycle. A 1998 Harley-Davidson Fat Boy. Midnight blue with chrome accents. Custom leather seat. The paint gleamed under the fluorescent lights like it had just rolled off the showroom floor. Cole made a sound that might have been a gasp or a sob or both. He moved toward the bike like he was in a trance, his hand reaching out to touch the fuel tank, the handlebars, the seat. This is mine, he whispered. This is my bike. I left it here when I moved to Billings because I couldn't afford to take it with me. I thought you'd have sold it years ago. Sell it? Why would I sell it? Because I abandoned it. Abandoned you. Abandoned everything. Everett shook his head. You didn't abandon this bike, son. You left it here for safekeeping. There's a difference. Cole was running his hands over every surface now, checking for damage, for rust, for any sign of neglect. But there was none. The bike was in perfect condition. Better than perfect. It looked newer now than it had when Cole had left it here 12 years ago. You've been maintaining it, Cole said. It wasn't a question. Every Saturday morning, I come out here at 7 o'clock. Change the oil every 6 months, whether it needs it or not. Keep the battery charged. Polish the chrome. Replace any parts that show wear. Everett moved to the workbench and picked up a worn notebook. I keep a log, everything I do to it, every part I replace, every mile I put on it. You put miles on it. I ride it, just up and down the driveway, maybe around the block a few times. Can't let an engine sit idle for too long or it seizes up. Learned that in the Army. Cole took the notebook with shaking hands and opened it. Page after page of meticulous records in Everett's careful handwriting. Dates, procedures, parts replaced, miles ridden. 12 years of Saturday mornings documented in blue ink. Why? Cole's voice was barely audible. Why would you do this? Everett was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. After you left, after that fight at your mother's funeral, I was angry. So angry I couldn't see straight. I'd go to bed angry and wake up angry and spend all day angry. And then one Saturday morning, about 3 months after you'd gone, I came out here to get a screwdriver and I saw the tarp over your bike. He moved closer to the Harley, running his own hand along the seat. I pulled the tarp off just like I did just now. And I looked at this bike, this thing you'd love so much, just sitting here gathering dust. And I thought about how your mother used to worry about you riding it. How she'd make you promise to wear your helmet and not go too fast. How she'd wait up until she heard you pull into the driveway safe. Everett's throat was tight now, but he pushed through. And I realized that if Irene was here, she wouldn't let this bike rot in the garage. She'd take care of it. Because taking care of your things was a way of taking care of you, even when you weren't here. So that's what I did. Cole was crying openly now, tears streaming down his face into his beard. You took care of my bike for 12 years because Mom would have wanted you to. No. Everett turned to face his son fully. I took care of your bike for 12 years because I wanted to. Because every Saturday morning when I came out here and changed the oil, or polished the chrome, or checked the tire pressure, I could talk to you. Tell you about my week. Tell you things I wished I'd said. Tell you I was sorry for being so stubborn about the house. Tell you I understood why you left. Tell you I loved you and missed you and wanted you to come home. Cole set the notebook down on the workbench and moved to his father. He wrapped his arms around Everett and held on tight, his whole body shaking with sobs. Everett held him back, this man who'd been a little boy not so long ago, and let him cry. I'm sorry, Cole kept saying. I'm so sorry, Dad. I wasted so much time. We both did, but we're here now. That's what matters. They stood like that for a long time, surrounded by tools and oil cans and the motorcycle that had become a symbol of everything they'd lost and everything they might still salvage. Finally, Cole pulled back and wiped his face with the back of his hand. Will you ride with me on the bike? I'm 81 years old, son. I don't know if that's such a good idea. Please, just once. Let me take you somewhere on the bike you've been taking care of all these years. Everett looked at the Harley gleaming and ready, looked at his son hopeful and vulnerable despite his tough exterior, and he nodded. Cole's face split into a grin. He found two helmets on a shelf, Everett's old one from decades ago, and Cole's from when he was younger. They were dusty but serviceable. He helped Everett put one on, adjusting the strap under his chin with gentle hands. Then he wheeled the motorcycle out of the garage. The engine turned over on the first try, roaring to life with a sound that echoed off the houses on Elm Street. Cole settled into the seat, and Everett climbed on behind him, his arms wrapping around his son's waist, just like they had earlier. Where are we going? Everett shouted over the engine. You'll see. They rode through Cider Falls, past Rosie's Diner, where Louise waved from the window, past the hardware store, and the library and the school where Irene had taught for 30 years. Then Cole turned onto the highway heading east, and Everett realized where they were going. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the Cedar Falls Memorial Cemetery. Cole drove slowly along the winding path until he reached a section near a large oak tree. He stopped the bike and cut the engine. Everett climbed off his legs, more steady this time, and followed Cole to a headstone made of gray granite. Sarah Irene Garrison, beloved wife and mother. The dates of her birth and death, and below that a simple inscription, forever in our hearts. Cole knelt down in front of the stone. Everett hadn't been here since the funeral, hadn't been able to make himself come. It hurt too much, but now standing here with his son, it felt right. Hi, Mom, Cole said softly. I'm sorry it's been so long. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. He reached out and traced her name with his finger. I brought Dad. We're talking again. We're going to be okay, I think. I hope. I wanted you to know that. Everett knelt down beside him, his knees protesting but holding. He placed his hand on the cool granite. Hi, sweetheart. I miss you. Every single day I miss you. But our boy came home today. Well, he came back. This is still his home, whether he lives here or not. They stayed there for a while, the two of them kneeling side by side in front of Irene's grave. The sun was higher now, approaching noon. Birds sang in the oak tree above them. The wind rustled through the grass. She would have been furious with both of us, Cole said eventually, for staying apart so long. She'd have knocked our heads together and told us we were being idiots. Yeah, she would have. Cole smiled through fresh tears. She was the best of us, the glue that held everything together. She was, but she's gone and we're still here, and she'd want us to live, to be a family, to not waste the time we have left. Everett looked at his son. I'm 81, Cole. I don't know how much time that is. Could be 10 years, could be 10 months, could be 10 days. But whatever time I've got, I want to spend it with you, if you'll have me. If I'll have you? Cole laughed, the sound wet but genuine. Dad, I've wanted nothing but to have you back in my life for 12 years. I just didn't know how to make it happen. Well, it's happening now. so let's not waste it. They stood up, both of them, groaning a little at the effort. Getting old was not for the faint of heart. Cole helped steady Everett, and together they walked back to the motorcycle. "Where to now?" Everett asked. "I was thinking we could grab some lunch. There's a place in Billings I want to take you. The Iron Brotherhood Clubhouse. I want you to meet my brothers properly. Show you where I spend my time, if you're up for it." "I'm up for it." The ride to Billings took 45 minutes. Everett held on tight and watched the Montana landscape roll by. Mountains in the distance, fields of grass bending in the wind. Big sky country, they called it, and it was true. The sky seemed to go on forever here. The Iron Brotherhood Clubhouse was on the outskirts of Billings, a large warehouse-style building with motorcycles parked out front. Cole pulled in and cut the engine. Several men came out to greet them, including Jake Rodriguez, who'd been at the diner earlier. "Boss, you made it, and you brought your old man." Jake extended his hand to Everett again. "Good to see you again, Mr. Garrison." "Please call me Everett, or Ev. Mr. Garrison makes me feel even older than I already am." Jake grinned. "Ev it is." Cole introduced him to the other members who were there. Rusty, a massive man with red hair and a beard that reached his chest. Tommy, younger than the others, maybe mid-20s, with nervous energy and quick hands. Marcus, quiet and thoughtful, with eyes that had seen too much. Leo, older, like Everett, probably in his 60s, with a prosthetic leg and a Marine Corps tattoo. They welcomed Everett like he was already family. Pulled out a chair for him, got him a beer, then switched to coffee when he said he didn't drink anymore. Asked him questions about his time in Vietnam, respectful and genuinely interested. Told him stories about Cole, about rides they'd been on, and trouble they'd gotten into, and lives they'd helped along the way. Everett learned that the Iron Brotherhood wasn't just a motorcycle club. It was a support network for veterans and their families. They did escort rides for military funerals. They raised money for VA hospitals. They helped veterans find jobs and housing. They were brothers in the truest sense of the word. And Cole was at the center of it all, the president, the leader, the man these tough bikers looked to for guidance and direction. Everett felt a swell of pride watching his son interact with his club. This was who Cole had become in the 12 years they'd been apart. A man who'd taken his pain and loss and turned it into something meaningful, something good. They had lunch, burgers and fries from a local joint that delivered, and Everett found himself laughing for the first time, and he couldn't remember how long. Really laughing until his bruised face hurt and he had to stop. "You should come to our next ride," Jake said. "We're doing a memorial run next month for fallen soldiers. Ride from Billings to the State Veterans Cemetery in Miles City. Lay wreaths, say some words. You'd be an honored guest." "I don't know. I'm not much of a rider." "You did fine on the way here," Cole said. "And it's not about being a rider, it's about honoring those who served. You're one of them. You belong there." Everett thought about it. Thought about riding with these men, these brothers, to honor the friends he'd lost 50 years ago in a jungle on the other side of the world. Thought about finally having a way to pay tribute that felt right. "Okay," he said. "I'll come." The cheer that went up made him feel like he'd just agreed to something much bigger than a motorcycle ride. But maybe he had. Maybe he'd agreed to be part of something again. Part of a community. Part of a family that extended beyond just him and Cole. They spent the afternoon at the clubhouse. Cole showed Everett around, pointing out photos on the walls of past rides and events. One photo in particular caught Everett's attention. It showed Cole with his arm around a young man in an army uniform. Both of them were smiling. "Who's this?" Everett asked. Cole's expression grew somber. "That's Derek Mills. He was killed in Afghanistan 3 years ago. IED. He was 23 years old." "I'm sorry." "We all are. That's why we do what we do. Why we ride for veterans, for their families. Because we know what it's like to lose someone, and we know how important it is to remember." Everett understood. This wasn't just a hobby or a way to pass time. This was Cole's mission, his purpose, the thing that got him up in the morning and kept him going when things got hard. As the afternoon turned to evening, Jake pulled Cole aside for a quiet conversation. Everett couldn't hear what they were saying, but he saw Jake gesture to him and Cole nod. When they came back, Jake was grinning. "We just voted," Jake announced to the room. "Everett Garrison is now an honorary member of the Iron Brotherhood. All in favor." Every hand in the room went up. Someone handed Everett a leather vest with the club's patches on it. It was too big for his thin frame, but he put it on anyway, and the room erupted in applause and cheers. Cole's eyes were bright with emotion. "Welcome to the family, Dad." "Thank you," Everett managed. "All of you. This means more than you know." They insisted on taking a photo Everett in the center, wearing his new vest surrounded by Cole and the other members. Someone promised to get it framed and hung on the wall with the others. By the time they left the clubhouse, it was nearly 6 in the evening. The ride back to Cedar Falls was beautiful, the sun setting behind the mountains and painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Everett had never felt more alive than he did in that moment. Arms around his son whined in his face, the world spread out before them. Cole pulled into the driveway on Elm Street just as full dark was settling in. They sat on the bike for a moment, neither of them ready to let go of the day. "You should stay," Everett said. "Your room is exactly how you left it." "I should get back to Billings. I've got work tomorrow." "Call in sick." Cole laughed. "I run my own construction company, Dad. Can't really call in sick to myself." "Then come back this weekend. Saturday. We'll have breakfast at Rosie's, together. Then maybe work on those shutters that need painting." "Yeah." Cole's voice was hopeful. "Yeah, if you want to." "I want to. I want to come back every weekend. I want to make up for lost time." "Then that's what we'll do." Everett climbed off the bike, his body protesting every movement. He was going to be sore tomorrow. Worth it, though. Absolutely worth it. Cole walked him to the front door. They stood there for a moment in the yellow glow of the porch light, father and son trying to figure out how to say goodbye after just finding each other again. "Thank you," Cole said, "for keeping my bike, for not giving up on me, for letting me back in. You're my son. There's nothing to let back in. You never left. Not really. Not where it counts." Everett tapped his chest over his heart. Cole pulled him into a hug, tight and fierce and full of 12 years of missing. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, son. Drive safe." "I will. I'll call you tomorrow." "You better." Cole got back on his motorcycle and started the engine. He sat there for a moment looking at the house, at his father standing on the porch. Then he put on his helmet, gave a final wave, and rode off into the night. Everett stood on the porch until the sound of the engine faded completely. Then he went inside to the house that felt a little less empty than it had this morning. He made himself some dinner, just scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy, and ate it at the kitchen table while reading the newspaper. The bruise on his face throbbed, but it didn't bother him as much as it had earlier. Pain was just pain. It would fade. Before bed, he went to Cole's room and stood in the doorway. This weekend, his son would be back. They'd have breakfast together, fix the shutters together, start rebuilding what they'd let crumble. It wouldn't erase 12 years, wouldn't bring back all the moments they'd missed, the birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays that had passed in silence. But it was a start. That night, Everett slept better than he had in years. The rest of the week passed in a blur. Cole called every day, sometimes twice, just to check in, just to talk, about work, about the weather, about nothing and everything. Everett found himself looking forward to those calls the way he used to look forward to Christmas morning when he was a child. On Wednesday, a package arrived. Inside was a new flannel shirt, blue like his old one, but without the worn spots and frayed collar. A note from Cole saw this and thought of you. Wear it Saturday. Everett did wear it Saturday. Put it on that morning with care, combed his hair, made sure his boots were polished. The bruise on his face had faded to a yellowish purple, still visible, but not as dramatic. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. His eyes were brighter somehow, less tired. He walked to Rosie's diner at 8:15 just like always. But this time, when he arrived, there was a motorcycle already parked outside. Cole was waiting at the corner booth, 2 cups of coffee already on the table. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, son." Everett slid into the booth across from Cole, and Louise came over with the biggest smile he'd ever seen on her face. "Well, look at this. Both my favorite Garrison men together again. What can I get you boys for breakfast?" They ordered the usual for Everett, and Cole got the same thing, because as he said, if it was good enough for his old man, it was good enough for him. They ate and talked and laughed, and Everett felt the eyes of the other customers on them, but didn't care. Let them look. Let them see that broken things could be mended if you were willing to try. After breakfast, they went back to the house and spent the afternoon working on the shutters. Cole did most of the actual work since he was younger and steadier on a ladder, but Everett helped where he could, holding tools and offering advice and just being present. When they finished, the house looked better. cared for, loved. Same time next Saturday, Cole asked as he packed up his tools. Same time next Saturday, Everett confirmed. And that became their new routine. Every Saturday, Cole would ride to Cedar Falls. They'd have breakfast at Rosie's. Then they'd work on the house together, tackling one project at a time. The sagging gutter, the creaky front step, the fence that needed mending. But more than the physical work, they were mending something else. The relationship that had been broken was being rebuilt board by board, conversation by conversation, shared meal by shared meal. 3 months after that first morning when Brock Haywood's fist had changed everything, Rosie's Diner hosted a special event. Veterans Appreciation Breakfast. The whole town turned out. Louise had decorated the diner with American flags and photos of local veterans throughout history. Everett had been asked to say a few words. He'd almost declined, not being much for public speaking, but Cole had encouraged him. So he stood up in front of the crowded diner, Cole beside him, and cleared his throat. "I fought in Vietnam," he began. His voice was shaky at first, but grew stronger. "Lost 17 brothers in 1 month during the siege of Khe Sanh. Came home to a country that didn't want to hear about it. Didn't want to acknowledge what we'd done or what we'd seen. For 50 years I carried that. Wondered why I survived when so many better men didn't." He paused, looking around the room at faces he'd known for decades and some he'd just met through Cole's club. Several Iron Brotherhood members had made the trip, including Jake, who sat at the counter with a cup of coffee and a proud smile. "I lost my wife 8 years ago to cancer. Lost my son to pride and stubbornness for 12 years after that. And 3 months ago, I sat in this very diner and got assaulted by a stranger. I was at my lowest point, ready to give up, ready to just wait for the end." Cole's hand found his shoulder, squeezed gently. "But that assault brought my son back to me. And through my son, I found a new family in the Iron Brotherhood. Found purpose again. Found a reason to get up in the morning beyond just habit." Everett's voice cracked, but he pushed through. "I survived Khe Sanh for a reason. I survived losing Irene for a reason. I survived that punch for a reason. And that reason is standing right here." He gestured to Cole. "My son taught me that it's never too late to forgive. Never too late to come home. Never too late to start over. And I want every veteran in this room to know that. No matter how much time has passed, no matter how broken you feel, no matter how alone you think you are, it's never too late." As Everett prepared to sit down, movement near the door caught his eye. A young man stood there, hesitant, hands shoved deep in his pockets. It took Everett a moment to recognize him without the anger and alcohol. Brock Haywood. The diner went quiet. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Cole tensed beside him, but Everett put a hand on his son's arm. Brock walked forward, slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. His eyes were clear now, sober. He looked younger somehow and deeply ashamed. "Mr. Garrison," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did was unforgivable. But I'm 90 days sober now, working at the VA center, trying to be better. And I wanted you to know that seeing you forgive your son," his voice cracked, "it made me think maybe I could be forgiven too. Maybe I could go home to my own dad and tell him I'm sorry." Everett looked at this young man who'd hurt him. Saw not a monster, but someone lost and trying to find his way back, just like Cole had been, just like Everett himself had been. He extended his hand. Brock stared at it, disbelieving. Then he took it, and Everett pulled him into a brief, firm handshake. "You can always go home, son," Everett said. "It's never too late." Brock's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, unable to speak, then turned and left quickly. But Everett saw him pause outside the window, pull out his phone and make a call. Through the glass, he could just make out the words, "Dad, it's me." The diner erupted in applause. Several people were crying, including Louise, who dabbed at her eyes with her apron. Everett sat down, his legs shaking, and Cole pulled him into a hug. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Cole whispered. "Mom would be proud too." "I hope so. I really hope so." The breakfast continued, full of laughter and stories, and the kind of community that small towns do best. Everett found himself surrounded by people, veterans, and their families, members of the Iron Brotherhood, neighbors, and friends both old and new. And there in the corner booth where he'd sat alone for so many years, Everett Garrison realized something. He'd spent 12 years thinking he was being punished, that losing Irene and then Cole was some kind of cosmic retribution for surviving Vietnam when better men hadn't. But maybe it wasn't punishment. Maybe it was just life, painful and beautiful and complicated and messy. And maybe the point wasn't to understand why bad things happen. Maybe the point was to keep going anyway, to keep showing up, to keep hoping that tomorrow might be better than today. He looked across the table at Cole, who was laughing at something Jake had said. Looked at the vest hanging on the hook by the door, the one that marked him as part of the Iron Brotherhood family. Looked at the half-eaten slice of apple pie on his plate that he'd ordered because it reminded him of Irene, who used to make the best apple pie in Cedar Falls. He'd lost so much, but he'd gained something too. Not a replacement for what was gone. Nothing could replace Irene or those lost years with Cole. But something new, something precious in its own right. A second chance. That's what this was, and Everett intended to make the most of every single moment of it. That afternoon, after the breakfast ended and the crowd dispersed, Cole asked if Everett wanted to go for a ride. Not on the motorcycle this time, but in Cole's truck. There was something he wanted to show him. They drove for about 20 minutes, heading west into the mountains. Cole pulled off onto a dirt road that climbed steadily upward, winding through pine trees and rocky outcroppings. Finally, they reached a clearing at the top of a ridge. Cole parked and they got out. The view was breathtaking. They could see for miles the valley below the town of Cedar Falls like a collection of toys in the distance, the mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. "I come up here sometimes," Cole said, "when I need to think, when I need to remember why I keep going. It's beautiful." "Yeah." Cole was quiet for a moment. "I brought Mom here once about a year before she got sick. Just the two of us. Dad was working and I had a day off, so I asked if she wanted to go for a drive. We ended up here." "I didn't know that." "We talked for hours about everything, about my job, about whether I should settle down and get married, about what she wanted for her life. And she told me something I've never forgotten." Cole's voice was thick with emotion. "She said that the measure of a life isn't how long you live or what you accomplish. It's how much love you give and receive. That's all that matters in the end." Everett felt tears prick his eyes. That sounded exactly like something Irene would say. "I wasted 12 years, Cole continued. 12 years when I could have been giving and receiving love from you. And I can't get those years back. But I can make sure I don't waste another day. That's why I wanted to bring you here. To tell you that from now on, I'm choosing love, choosing family, choosing you. I'm choosing you too, son, every day for the rest of my life, however long that is." They stood there together on that ridge, father and son, looking out at the world spread before them. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting everything in golden light. Everett thought about the journey that had brought him here. Vietnam and Irene and Cole. Loss and pain and loneliness. But also love and hope and redemption. All of it woven together into the tapestry of his life. He was 81 years old. His hands trembled. His face still bore the fading marks of Brock Haywood's assault. His body ached in ways it never had when he was young. But his heart was full. Fuller than it had been in 12 years. Maybe fuller than it had ever been. Because he'd learned something important. Something he wished he'd understood decades ago. That love doesn't run out. That families can be broken and mended. That it's never too late to come home. He reached over and took Cole's hand, held it tight. And together they watched the sun sink lower, painting the Montana sky in shades of fire and gold, while somewhere in Cedar Falls, in a small house on Elm Street, 2 rooms waited. One for a father who was learning to live again. One for a son who had finally found his way home. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be hard days. Days when the old wounds ached. Days when they'd stumble over the 12 years of silence that still sat between them like a ghost. But they'd face those days together. Father and son. Veteran and protector. 2 men who'd lost their way and found each other again through grace and forgiveness and the stubborn refusal to give up on love. And that, Everett thought, as the last rays of sunlight faded and the stars began to appear, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.